Hello and welcome back to this new episode of the Songwriting Idiots podcast, the show where every month two idiots write a song in a genre and on a topic decided by you, the listener, and stay here until the very end to find out how to get involved. But first of all, hello Dan, how are you doing today?
Hello Ralf. Well, today is a fairly strange day for several reasons. Number one, this is the first show that we've done virtually in a very long time. I think we worked it out. It was back in May we did our last one.
May or June, yes.
Yeah.
Been a while.
We've had the privilege of being able to record in the same place over the past few months, band retreat or in Munich. And here we are, me in Vienna and you in Munich. And talking about Vienna, we're actually recording this the day after a very sad terror attack that happened here last night.
Yeah, we still don't know very much, right?
No, it's totally shocking and sad, and everyone here is a little bit on edge. So obviously that's quite a big deal. And then we've also got the first day of lockdown today as well in Austria, lockdown 2.0. So we're not allowed to leave our flats after 8 p.m. and then we can leave our flats again at 6 a.m.
That is wild.
Yeah, so there's that. And to top it all off, our good friend Donald Dump is a
friend of the show.
A friend of the show. Hi, Donald. There's some form of election happening tonight, I think. So
they are still calling it that, right? It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, they call it the vote of a generation, although I'm pretty sure they say that every time.
Yeah.
Wasn't that Obama because he was black, and then there was Hillary because she was a woman, and now it's just anybody but Trump, please, right?
Well, yeah. Hopefully for enough people anyway, but
yeah,
we shall see.
So today is a fairly strange day, I would say. How are you doing?
Well, I'm also feeling a bit strange. I wasn't this close, luckily, to the shooting, but also getting more involved in US politics than in recent years, I think, or I feel like I've thought about it a bit more than I usually do. It is a crazy time. So I'm not going to stay up tonight to watch any results come in, but I'm anxious yet hopeful about tomorrow. And it's been an interesting kind of weird feeling all day. But I guess most listeners, even though this will probably come out after the election, certainly will, can probably relate to that. It's a weird time. But nonetheless, we are here not to complain about politics, but to complain about each other's songs and the topics thrown at us by awful listeners. Thank you.
Whoever came up with your aunt's obsession with Crocs shoes, how are we meant to write a song about this?
We will find out. But first, before we get there, we have to listen to what we did back in October's episode, which was all about German hip-hop, and it sounded a little bit like this.
Überflutet von der zweiten Welle. Du denkst, du bist ein Held, so eine Art Gorbatschow. Schwing dich auf dein Boris-Bike und fuck off.
So that was our attempt at writing a German rap song about Boris Johnson and his response to the COVID pandemic. And you, the listeners, gave us the wonderful genre of ska to work with this month. And as already mentioned, the rather less, it was tricky, shall we say, to write a ska song about our aunt's obsession with Croc shoes. So as Ralf said, I'm very excited to see how these turned out. So, Ralf, ska music, tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I find it quite an interesting genre when it comes to the history, even though I don't enjoy much of it. We will probably come to that. But yeah, ska music, very roughly speaking, is widely considered but maybe probably the predecessor of reggae music. It also came from Jamaica. We're talking about the late 50s, maybe, early 60s, certainly, when it started to become popular there. And it's actually interesting because the root of, very ska word actually, the root of ska music is very much in North American music of the time. So the blues and to a certain degree jazz made it over to Jamaica as well. And somehow it developed a weird Caribbean rhythm on top of that. and changed from there, and it really became its own thing in the 60s. Also, apparently, because in Jamaica, rock and roll was really not very popular. So they instead stuck to their own new style, taking elements from all over the place, basically, both from Jamaica, from the US, to a degree, even from Europe. And that is what is considered the first wave of ska music. So this is really the beginning of it all. But ska basically stuck around in Jamaica, even though it quickly became less important, especially in the US and in most parts of Europe. But in Jamaica, it stayed relevant. And it merged into a new genre called rocksteady later on in the late 60s. And rocksteady really became the foundation of reggae in the 70s with, of course, Bob Marley and many others that are still quite famous today. And to this day, as far as I can tell, there are ska bands from the first generation around even in Jamaica, but also there have been further waves of ska, it is called. And especially the second wave of ska should be quite familiar to you because that didn't primarily come from Jamaica, but actually came from the UK, right?
It did indeed. It had actually a pretty big influence on British pop culture. It kind of came in the mid to late 70s and continued to kind of through to the mid 80s, late 80s, and it was called two-tone. And as you mentioned, it was kind of this second wave, which we all know so much about. And it was so two-tone. It's kind of a strange name, and it comes from the record label that these bands were signed to, and they kind of mixed members between each other quite a lot, which reminds me a lot of Motown. For those of you who haven't heard our Motown episode, go have a listen, because they also kind of shared members quite a lot, and even had kind of the same band that played most of the music. So they had these kind of integrated lineups quite often, and the famous bands from this kind of time are kind of the Specials. They're very, very famous, and Madness, who are one of my favorite bands from this era. I used to listen to them a lot on the radio in the UK. And these kind of bands were associated with various things. They were associated with a particular dance called skanking, which you kind of see in their music videos. It's kind of almost like a funny kind of jumping walk thing. They always wore these kind of suits, and the covers of the album were black and white, exactly. Yeah. And they were associated with mods. And so they were kind of a subgenre of kind of British popular culture, and also skinheads as well. And if any of you have seen the movie This Is England, listen to the soundtrack, and you will hear a lot of this kind of music and see how it influenced the UK, well, actually Britain mostly, in that particular time point.
Especially in the last scene. So go watch the movie, and the last kind of the most dramatic scene of the movie really is all about that.
It's really a top soundtrack. I'm sure many of the songs that we choose for our Spotify playlist will come from that. And then, as I mentioned, Madness were one of the biggest bands in this time, and they actually were the ones that took it across the Atlantic and led towards the third wave of ska. So we've had the first, the kind of original from Jamaica, the second wave, the two-tone groups. Now we come to the third wave, which kind of went over to the US.
Yeah, and it's really hard to say what exactly is part of the third wave of ska, especially for me, who is not really a fan of the genre. But it has been an overlap. So in the 90s, we have a new ska movement in the US. But at the same time, we have one of the worst genres I can think of, the Ska Punk movement. And they are not exactly the same thing, so it would be unfair to say that. But I would argue that from the 90s, the bands that are still known today were not the pure ska bands, but were more likely the Ska Punk bands like Less Than Jake and the Mighty Boss Tones.
Yeah.
Were some of them. And I think this is just about the lamest music coming out of the 90s. We're talking about a time when we had grunge, we had, metal in the form of like System of a Down and stuff coming up. We had Rage Against the Machine, a lot of great music. Later on, we had pop punk, which was our first episode here, if you haven't listened to that, which was also great in its own way. But ska punk, I don't get it. I don't know.
Same. And I watched an interview with a ska punk band. Don't remember who they were. They weren't very famous. And they were like, it was all the rage for like 2 or 3 years, and everybody wanted to play it. And everyone was learning these ska punk songs. And the bands that wanted to try and be big ska punk bands, they were like when the kind of it all ended and when pop punk came along, they couldn't do anything else. So they were like, why did we do this? This is awful. One thing I found really interesting, actually, that I didn't know was the band No Doubt. So Gwen Stefani was the lead singer of that band. Their biggest hit was Don't Speak, which is very much not a ska song, but they had some ska music right at the beginning. I had no idea. So if you search for No Doubt ska, you can see Gwen Stefani trying to make ska music, which is, I suppose, semi-successful.
And the focus is on Gwen Stefani trying to make ska music. That's the emphasis there.
I'm very pleased that she stopped.
Oh, God. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, never a big fan of No Doubt anyway. But yeah, I probably have to listen to that. I didn't catch that. But yeah, so basically ska today, I would say, is still around. It's not a particularly popular genre anymore, both in Jamaica and the US. Maybe the UK is where it's still most kind of well regarded anyway, right? It's still on the radio and it's still kind of part of wider, broader popular culture, even though it's not current anymore.
A little bit, and you often see bands like Madness at like the afternoon slot at a festival.
Yeah, legend spots and stuff. Right? Yeah,
exactly.
So, well, but that's about it. We are the ones who have to take this trend forward now, apparently, because we were tasked with writing a ska song. And this month, you are up first, and let's get our beers ready, because obviously I can't listen to your music without a beer.
So, this has been a pretty tough month for me, actually, October.
Oh, yes.
I did sober October. So I did not drink any booze for the whole month of October. And
don't you worry, I drank for the two of us.
Thank you so much. I knew you would. I drank a lot of alcohol-free beer, actually. I kind of got into it. My kitchen is just full of bottles of alcohol-free beer. I look like a proper alcoholic. So I'm very happy that I can now drink a beer finally. And my beer today is Murawa, and I've committed the cardinal sin, Ralf. The cardinal sin. I just went to pick it up.
No, you did not.
I went to pick it up from my fridge, and I didn't think.
Oh, no.
I thought, I'll just open it. So mine's already open. It's an absolute disaster. So listeners won't get to hear the lovely of my beer. But I hope yours is double as good to make up for it.
Yeah, I'm again going back to classic old Giesinger. Because in lockdown, I always order 2 crates of beer that are just lying around here. So, can't be asked. But let's see. That was nice, wasn't it?
Good enough.
Good enough for us. And I even brought a glass.
I'm looking forward to this. I have to say, it's not actually my first beer. It's my second beer.
Oh, no.
Because my first beer, I had to celebrate with a good friend of mine because he told me that he is having a baby.
All right, shout out.
So that was a nice, and he's a listener of the podcast as well. Yes, so we had a beer to celebrate then, which I think is justified. I'm drinking a Murawa, by the way, in case I didn't mention it, which is a very nice beer from Steiermark.
Takes me back to band retreat. That's where we had it last.
What a great time that was. Anyway, we digress. It's time to get on to the first song, which my song this time.
Can you tell me a little bit about it before we take a listen?
I will do. So I think it includes what I would consider to be the real classic elements of ska. For those of you who maybe haven't listened to ska before or aren't quite sure what it is, it's very standard to have an offbeat guitar. So
I guess you couldn't be ska without that.
Correct.
That is.
Madness did have some songs without any offbeat in them, but they were very much outliers in that sense. Almost all songs have this offbeat guitar. Many two-tone bands, that was the second wave, they included this kind of Hammond organ sound. And this reminded me actually very much of your Disney song, actually, Ralf. Yeah. This kind of fairground noise, and it's very upbeat and danceable, I guess, and it's also kind of weird, right? Ska. You have license to be as wacky as you want with ska because a lot of the bands were just... I mean, this band is literally called Madness. You can be as crazy as you want. So you will hear those things in my song, and more than anything else, you will hear some horns because the brass section from I mean, it existed in the first wave, but it really became an important part of ska in the second wave and then onwards, right? It became possibly even more prevalent as time went on. So I know how much you love brass, Ralf. So you're going to love my song.
No, I don't mind brass at all. I suck at producing it. That's a very different thing.
Yeah, it's not so easy. So here's my song, and my song is called Auntie Jane.
Can't wait.
Let me tell you about my family. It's just my Auntie Jane, my cat, and me. She's 43 and got a cracking tan, and she's wondering why she can't find a man. Bright blue eyes, a gorgeous smile, and from the feet up she's got style. But it's a shame that she can't see. She's suffering with OCD, obsessive croc disorder. Oh, I tried to warn her. Obsessive croc disorder. Oh, I tried to warn her, my Auntie Jane. My Auntie Jane. She's just got Crocs on the brain, my Auntie Jay. All started last year in May. I remember it like it was yesterday. She bought her first pair from the local store. My uncle couldn't believe what he saw. He took one look and then he said, "You wouldn't catch me in those things dead." He was a good guy, my Uncle Paul. You can guess what she wore to his funeral. Obsessive croc disorder. Oh, I tried to warn her. Obsessive croc disorder. Oh, I tried to warn her, my Auntie Jane. My Auntie Jane. She's just got Crocs on the brain, my Auntie Jane. It started off with just one pair. Now it's descended into a Croc nightmare. Too late, I fear. She's got a pair for every day of the year. Obsessive croc disorder. Oh, I tried to warn her. Obsessive croc disorder. Oh, I tried to warn her, my Auntie Jane. My Auntie Jane. My Auntie Jane. She's just got Crocs on the brain, my Auntie Jane.
Let me, before we start, yeah, that will help. Just, for the old throat. I did enjoy that, I have to say, even though listening to more modern ska, which I count anything after the 70s under this kind of umbrella, I didn't really enjoy any of that stuff, but this I did actually enjoy. So
this is kind of a compliment from you, Ralf.
I mean, that's the biggest compliment you can expect.
I think I've ever got from you, mate.
Probably, yeah. And unfortunately, it's even on tape, so that's the worst. I shouldn't have done that. So I think a couple of things that really stood out to me. I really liked the instrumentalization. I mean, you already mentioned the organ, and starting with the organ already takes you back to the 70s. Even not knowing anything about ska at that time, it reminds me a lot of this kind of early hard rock thing, Deep Purple, Uriah Heep, these kind of bands. They all used the hell out of their Hammond organs. and it really took me back. And I loved the crazy jump into the kind of the main rhythm bit right after that, which actually reminded me a bit of my Disney song, just a lot better.
Slightly less mystical fairground.
A bit less spooky, but still quite fairgroundy. So that's cool. I think you kind of nailed the story. Yeah, I know you complained a little bit about the topic beforehand, and I don't really see why, because I think you nailed it. Yeah, it is a bit challenging, of course, but I think the result is actually a quite funny story. So well done on that.
Thanks. That was actually probably the most difficult thing for me, trying to get a concept, and it came to me whilst I was on a walk. I don't know why, and I was like, what? Why could she be obsessed with Crocs? Why could my aunt be really obsessed with Crocs? Maybe it's like a disease she has. What could it be? I was like, well, it could be like, it's obsessive croc. I was like, wait a minute. Wait a second.
We're onto something here.
I actually had several other ideas. Would you like to hear them?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
So the one that really sticks in my mind was, so in both stories, Uncle Paul dies. That's the one constant.
Which is very telling.
Right. And the other idea I had was that she could, really want to wear these Crocs, and Uncle Paul wouldn't let her, and therefore she murders him.
Oh, that would have also been a very good story. It's a very weak motif for a murder.
Yeah.
But then again, if you have OCD, that's what you would do.
Well, right. But I actually started with that one, but the problem was that it was very hard to build up that story. I mean, how do you? Because he's got to die at some point, and then what do you do after that? I suppose you could, how she disposes with the body or something. But it was, I found that very, very.
I guess you could kill him in the second verse, and then he would just repeat choruses after that. But then that would mean.
But what would you say in the chorus?
It would have to be very vague. Yeah.
It's so I found that a little too difficult to write. I wanted to write it, but that's why I went for the OCD option, the obsessive croc disorder.
Nice. It really that really says everything about me, that I'm just a guitarist. When I hear OCD, I think of the Fulton OCD overdrive pedal. Hopeless.
You are unique, Ralf. You are very unique.
It's the classic gas, the gear acquisition syndrome we talked about at some point.
Yeah, it is indeed.
Talking about how you build the song. So you talked about the words, basically, right? The lyrics. Mm. How did you go about writing the chord progression and the layering of elements? How did you start? How was your process?
Yeah, so with that one, I started with the guitar, as is pretty common, I think, for both of us. I started with the guitar, and as I mentioned, it's offbeat, and it's pretty fast offbeat in this song. It's I think 150 beats per minute, which is pretty fast, and it was really, really, really hard to get it all in time and keep the rhythm going, because my hand was on fire.
Be honest, did you play the entire thing or did you loop it?
I played the entire thing.
Brave.
Yeah, I played the entire thing because whenever I looped it, there was always a slight timing problem, or I had to cut it somewhere weird.
So you did try. Good.
Yeah, of course I tried. I'm not a total idiot, but it's not a particularly long song, so it's about 3 minutes, I think, and I just about survived. I did it once, of course, but it was also quite cool to go into that kind of breakdown section before each chorus.
Yeah.
It was hard to do that in separate chunks, because it just sounded very much like separate chunks if you did that. So that's why I played it all in one go. Those kind of breakdown bits, by the way, before the chorus, I thought were pretty important, because otherwise it's just 3 minutes of your brains being bashed out by high rhythm guitar and horns, right?
I tell you what that is. If it wasn't a two-tone, if that was a Ska Punk song, and clearly it's not, that would be the part where people are getting ready for the mosh pit that follows. So,
right.
And I saw it in my mind's eye. I kind of saw that, and I was like, yeah, that's cool. You're getting ready to, maybe just dance, but maybe even mosh. So I find it cool. It's a good image in my head.
Yeah. And then what came next? I think what came next was, I mean, the organ was pretty quick to put in, right? I just had to find the right sound. So I had to basically listen to Fairgrounds and then find the same organ. I actually watched a couple of videos about it, and they gave me some tips about which sound to use. Yeah, and then came the horns. And the horns took some time, because to get the right kind of melody for the horns was tricky, because ska uses particular sorts of horn melodies. They're different to the ones that I used, for example, in the Motown episode. They're less probably melodic and more just you know, they're meant to get you boogieing and dancing a little bit.
Yeah, they stay on the same note. They stay on the same note for a very long time as well, right? So,
often, yeah, and then they kind of staccato it a bit every now and again. I actually used three different kind of brass instruments. I used the trumpet, of course. I used the trombone, and I used the saxophone as well.
That's the Holy Trinity, isn't it?
It is indeed. So I messed around for a long time with that, with those, you know, with the different horn sounds and playing different things on different instruments, just seeing what sounded cool. And I was pretty happy with what came out. Actually, I think it's pretty danceable.
It is, yeah.
Skankable, shall we say? And and then after that, the drum beat came very, very early on. It's a fairly straight beat, right? And then it was the lyrics and the melody, which took a while actually. The writing the lyrics and getting a melody that was pretty catchy but not monotone and boring. That's always tricky, right? Getting a semi-interesting melody,
especially in a genre where the chords tend to hang around for quite a bit, right? In your song, they don't actually do it as much, but in many ska songs, it feels like you can have one chord for forever. And then kind of getting an interesting melody out of this is really quite challenging.
It's tough, yeah. And they didn't actually do it that often. I mean, they made interesting melodies, of course, but they weren't crazy melodies. If you listen to ska, it's always pretty. It's all within a certain range, right? It's no one going crazy on the vocals. Thank goodness, right? Because it's not as if we're professional singers.
Yeah, that would always. Yeah, you are much better than me, but no. That would be tough.
Oh, stop it, you.
I mean, after a year of taking singing lessons, you better be.
Yeah, otherwise that's a lot of money wasted, right?
Yeah, come on. What would you think surprised you? Going into this, knowing what ska is, or thinking to know what ska is, what did you find surprising in the music or in the process of recreating it?
I found surprising. Actually, I found surprising the keys of the songs. So I did a little bit of digging, and we write songs as guitarists in guitar-friendly keys, right?
E, A, maybe.
Yeah, E, A, G. The keys that don't tend to destroy our hands, because you have to play the things creating crazy places all over the neck,
especially on your guitars. Yeah,
right. Yeah, especially acoustic guitars, they're the worst. And in the case of ska, what I discovered was a lot of the songs are written not in keys that are good for guitars, but in keys that are good for horns, for brass.
Because that's a timbre thing, right?
It is, and it's that plus the fact that these instruments are often in particular keys. So I think it's the trombone, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe trumpet. Please let us know if it's in B flat a lot of the time. So that's why a lot of ska songs are in B flat, and that's why my particular song is also in B flat. And that is a horrible key to play on the guitar,
especially if you play it off the A string. High up the neck, it becomes bearable.
Yeah. It was that, my hand's still recovering, I think. So that I found interesting. I also found interesting looking into the culture a little bit, right? Because it's probably, along with maybe Motown, one of the genres that has really influenced culture, particularly in Britain, right? And it was interesting to read about that and to watch a few videos about that, and just to see how music again can influence a culture in such a way. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's again talking about this is England, right? It's interesting to see how. What do you call it even? Is West Indie still a thing you say? But kind of Caribbean culture, right? How influential it actually was in like UK youth culture all the way from like the 60s on, basically, right? And it's just something that doesn't get talked about a whole lot, or it's also not something that is very obvious on the surface. as for usual, these kind of cultural influences usually aren't, and it's interesting to go into that and try to see some connections and see how things developed. And yeah, I found it exactly the same thing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm not sad to say goodbye to it, actually. I quite enjoyed it. I discovered more new artists that I had never heard of before, but I thought did a pretty good job in that two-tone era, right? As soon as it gets towards the mid-'80s and onwards, I didn't like it. But there are a few songs that I will listen to semi-regularly, I think, from now on. It wasn't too bad. Yeah, it wasn't too bad.
Anything else you want to add, or shall we move on?
No, I think that's it from me. I'm not too sad to say goodbye. It's a pretty cool genre, I think. I think I like it a bit more than you do. But now it's time to see how you did with your ska song. I can't wait. So, as we've discovered over the past few episodes, Ralf, I think you have become the sort of self-proclaimed king of autotune. And from what I can tell, it's going to be pretty hard to use autotune in this genre. Did you manage it?
Yes. I could not do it, but it's really very, very little. I kind of tweaked my harmonies with autotune a little bit, but
okay,
just because I was lazy, not to make it an effect or anything.
And you wanted to do it in exactly the same way as they did back then, right? Whenever it is your song is based in.
Who doesn't remember? Who doesn't remember the autotune?
Madness autotune. Yeah,
yeah. I was getting a bit lazy, but yeah, it's not a central part of the song, let's say.
So, what is a central part of the song? Tell me. What can I expect?
As usual, I mean, last month was an exception, but usually I go old school, and I did so again. So it was quite a journey.
Older than me. So you're
older than you. I'm going proper first wave, which was surprising to me as well, because going into this, I thought, okay, I mean, I'm kind of a punk kid growing up, so I was like, yeah, sure. Doing Ska Punk would probably be the natural thing. Then I listened to it, and as we discussed, it's a disgrace, not worth anyone's time. So with some exceptions, Rancid was a good band, but yeah, whatever. So I decided against that very quickly. Then we had a quick chat, and I complained about it like 2 weeks ago, maybe. And then you told me that you find two-tone a bit more interesting, so I gave that a listen, and it was more interesting, but still didn't really float my boat. And then I actually discovered some really like proper first wave old school stuff. Some of the like actual first bands doing it, like the Scatterlights and some others. And I found a playlist on Spotify and listened to that, and I was immediately taken back. Again, we're talking about the movie a whole lot, but This Is England is something that was quite important to me and to you, as I know, as a movie and as kind of a cultural thing. And they had one of these first wave bands in the soundtrack quite prominently with a couple of songs, Toots and the Maytals. And I was very happy to kind of rediscover them, haven't listened to them in many years. And a couple of other bands that were quite similar to them, and so I decided to do that. And otherwise, I think the songs are not too dissimilar, because I also chose to write kind of a story song about not my aunt, well, technically my aunt, but it's a story set in Kentucky.
Okay, and, interesting.
Yeah, and the
is
song
it about horses as well?
Unfortunately, no horses.
Oh.
I'm sorry, but trucks. There's a truck.
Thing.
There's a truck somewhere in there, anyway.
And what's your song called?
It's called Fort Knox.
I am very curious.
Sunday morning comes and we're on our way down to Meade County Jail to see Aunt Gail and contemplate her tale. She had the coolest story of all inmates out of all prison blocks when she robbed Fort Knox in her Crocs. Oh, she tried to run and leave the cops behind, and I think she could have won, but her shoes were real designed. Oh, after 13 long years, Gail got out last week. I drove to pick her up in my truck. She stumbled out of the block. The days after that, Gail got real depressed. When I asked her to stop, she mentioned her Crocs and how she missed Fort Knox. Yeah, she missed it. Out of my socks when I read the news that day. A lady broke into Fort Knox and no Crocs in our hallway. Oh, 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 so Sunday morning comes and we're on our way down to Meade County Jail to see Aunt Gail and bid her farewell. Another Sunday morning comes and we're on our way down to Meade County Jail to see Aunt Gail. We bid her farewell.
Well, I feel like I should be sat on a desert island with a nice cocktail listening to that song.
Oh.
Good vibes.
Oh, that's exactly what I wanted to accomplish.
Great vibes. So, some first impressions for you. So, I think it's pretty clear that the beat was, number one, way slower than mine, right? It's much more this kind of, easygoing vibe, right? That was definitely a much bigger part of the first wave. I think it ended after the first wave, right? You don't see it in any other ones.
It became very upbeat after that, yeah.
Extremely upbeat, yeah. What tempo was the song set at?
110, so that's significantly slower than your 150, yeah.
Yeah, 40 beats per minute slower than mine, yeah. But has a really nice groove to it. Really, really cool. The story. So the story seems to be about Aunt Gail and her robbing Fort Knox in her Crocs, right?
Well, yeah.
And then, so I'm going to pick you up on this. So, why did she rob Fort Knox?
She should have broken into Fort Knox.
Yeah.
But
also, why did she want to break into Fort Knox?
Well, because
something you want to break out of?
No, it's the gold reserves. You fool!
Oh,
the U.S. gold reserves are apparently. I think that might also be a myth.
I thought it was a prison.
It might also be a prison, but it's certainly famous for the gold reserves of the U.S. Whatever reserves they still have. Probably none. Sure. They're now all in petroleum, but it used to be that.
In any event, heavily guarded, and she clearly thought that the Crocs would get her in.
Well, I don't know. She's just a woman who only wears Crocs. That's all she does, and I still think she would have had a chance to escape, but her shoes were just ill-designed.
Yeah, it's such a shame.
It is a shame.
And she's Aunt Gail, right?
Abigail. So, yeah.
I had Aunt Jane and Aunt Gail. I feel we should apologise to all Aunt Janes and Gails.
I took a name that isn't too common just to be on the safe side.
I'm sure there are plenty of Auntie Janes. If any of you listeners have an Auntie Jane, please send us a picture of you with your Auntie Jane, and ideally with some Crocs shoes. Or an Auntie Gail would be hilarious to see you with your Crocs shoes. One thing I also kind of picked up on was this, classic walking bass line, right? That I didn't really do too much of because there were so many instruments going all over the place. I think it would have just, blown people's minds. It was this cool, like a walking bass line, and it gave like a little, I don't know, especially with the guitar, it gave me kind of a calypso feel. Like that's why I can imagine myself sitting on a sun lounger in Jamaica on the beach, sipping my cocktail, listening to the song, just chilling, good vibes, really cool. Really enjoyed it. I would also love to see the music video to that song.
Oh God, it would basically look like a trailer for a movie. Her running, basically Fort Knox in the background, and you see her running towards the camera and then stumbling because she's wearing fucking Crocs.
Yeah. No.
And then I come and pick her up 13 years later in my truck, and she stumbles out of the prison because she's still wearing her damn Crocs.
Top video, that.
That would be a great video. I'd love to do it.
Would be, yeah. So, tell me a little bit about your process. How did you write this song?
Actually, I really, really enjoyed it. It was very, very quick because I realized, and I wasn't aware of this, that especially in the first wave, it uses all the musical vocabulary I'm very familiar with, which is basically the blues. It's completely built on the blues. All the chord progression is classic kind of blues style 1-4-5 stuff going on, all major chords. And I knew somewhat instinctively because as a lead guitarist, I guess most of us are very much blues influenced. That's kind of the way it is. I kind of knew how to work with this. So it was a very simple process. I had very few tracks. Like in my program, I only had 11 tracks of instruments. It was very, very easy to do. So actually, I started with melody and lyrics, and only then kind of thought about chords, which took me like 2 minutes because I'm literally only playing the 1 chord and the 4 chord in the verses or in the A parts. Yeah. And then I do the same thing, just the other way around in the B part, and I end on the 5 chord to go back into the 1. So like the most classic progression you could think of.
In which key?
In A major.
In A major. A nice key, that, isn't it?
That's a nice key. So I'm doing the classic ADE walk. And it was really easygoing and good fun working with it because I never really got lost. And all the elements that I did add, which were maybe not something I would usually do, like the offbeat and also the backdrop maybe, I managed to incorporate them quite easily because the majority of this was something I was quite used to.
What came after the kind of lyrics and the chords? What was kind of the last thing you did?
The last thing I did was the trombone. There is a trombone in there.
Is there?
It's buried. It's buried deep. Because I realized that, I mean, all the bands in the 60s had a brass section, but they weren't very prominent. They were usually, doing either an offbeat thing, kind of doubling the guitar, or they were doing some minor lines like hard left, hard right, somewhere doing something kind of in the stereo landscape. But they weren't really that important, I feel, or at least they didn't really drive the song as much as they did in later versions.
Fully agree with you. Yeah, fully agree with you.
So I was like, yeah, I'm shit at working with brass instruments, so I'm gonna do this at an absolute minimum. And I first just added a trombone on the hard right, which you can hear if you know it's there. And it was just really doubling the guitar. And later on, I actually changed it and made it a kind of a rhythmic thing. It's now doing on the first and on the 3, so kind of beat. And so it's like, blew me out of my socks, that kind of these kind of accents. But it's very quiet. So that was the last thing I did. But generally, it was enjoyable because I could really quickly go into recording and then kind of play with it while already having some stuff laid down. So I used a drum beat that I downloaded, just adjusted it to 110. I then did the guitar, and from there it was really kind of playing. I did the lead guitar then before even doing the bass. So there's this lead guitar on the hard left, which you can hear way more clearly than the trombone, and that is actually doing an interesting thing. It's doing the same thing the bass was going to do, but the bass wasn't programmed yet. So it's doing the 1-3-5 kind of walk, the major chord, but it also plays major 6. So it's you can just about hear it, and it's just this and there's this little thing there which I really enjoyed, and that is something I played around with for quite a while just because it was good fun to do. And from there it was just kind of smooth sailing, doing the bass after that, and at that point the song was basically done. So
yeah, you messaged me and you were like, I'm having so much fun recording this. And I was like, that surprises me because number one, you've already expressed your distaste for most of the genre. So I was not expecting you to be like, yeah, this is awesome. But it seems like you had a lot of fun doing it. And do you think that comes from almost the relative simplicity of the genre?
I think so. I mean, honestly, there are two reasons for this, at least. So number one, I'm still after 7 months of doing this with you. This is the first time I started getting into recording, right? When we started this project.
Yeah, sure.
But still after 7 months, I'm not someone, I don't feel confident with a full DAW in front of me, like a full software running with like 25 tracks in front of me. I get lost. I don't like it. And having a very limited number of instruments, very small number of tracks, knowing what I wanted to do and not having to use many tools to achieve it was it was a joy. It was really good fun.
And as I always say, there's beauty in simplicity, Ralf.
You always say that, and I always doubted you, but now I know you're right.
So that's why I make really complicated songs with like 30 instruments.
Oh yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's obviously kind of a question of type, what you're into. But I also like to listen to music that is quite bare bones, right? I like blues, I like country, I like a lot of kind of old style stuff that really only had like maybe an 8 or 16 track thing going on back then, right? And it really made me feel like working under 60s, 70s circumstances just digitally and not with a tape machine. But I didn't have to use anything except for that little bit of auto-tune that didn't exist back then. And it was just a good experience.
It's an interesting point, isn't it? Because I think a lot of... So the temptation, let's say, is to overproduce things, right? So this is quite an interesting point because this is something that I've learned over the past kind of months regarding producing my own songs, is that I have a tendency, I think, to maybe slightly overproduce things. And I've really tried to take steps back sometimes where, I want to put in this, the kitchen sink, and then I think this is not really necessary. And it just makes it all too packed, right? And often it's actually really cool to just say, okay, what's the most important instrument here? What do I want to be the most important thing in this song? And then build it around that, right? And that's an interesting question, actually. What do you think is the most important thing in your song?
Honestly, for me, but that's very subjective and no one listening to this song like afresh would think that. But for me, it's the lead guitar on the hard left that's really driving it. That's the thing that makes it interesting to me, because you constantly throughout the entire song, except for like parts in the solo, you have a in your left ear, and it's constantly propelling it forward. And I love that. It's certainly not the most important instrument in there, but it's the thing that makes the song something I enjoy and something I like. And it's the one thing I'm really happy with.
So, final thoughts. What do you think you'll take with you from the genre of ska, if anything?
Well, I probably learned that even if you don't like something on the surface, sometimes it's worth digging a bit deeper to find something that you actually do enjoy, which I clearly did now. I experienced it a little bit with Motown already, but never to that extent. I didn't enjoy it as much as I actually did ska now. And number two is I really learned to embrace this kind of simplicity and the limited use of instruments, because this time, for the first time properly, I actually had it laid out on a piece of paper, like all the instruments and what they are doing. And I just worked it off, and I didn't add stuff later on just because I could. And that's something I'm going to keep doing. Like, think about my orchestration or arrangement, rather, beforehand, before even hearing it, and commit.
It's an interesting way of doing it, because I do it actually most of the time the opposite. I put something down and then I play with it and take things away and add things to it. But this is the cool thing, right? There's no right or wrong way to do this.
Sure.
And we've both learned new ways of doing this stuff, which is really cool.
And a lot comes down to how familiar you are with your program as well, which is probably a main reason why I don't tend to do what you're doing, because I just can't, or at least I don't feel like I can. So yeah, that would probably be it. Any final thoughts on the genre from your side before we move into the last section of talking about next month?
Do you know what? I think let's just go straight there. Thank you, Ska. It's been fun, but now it's time to move on.
We shall.
So if you listen to our last episode, you'll know that this episode, you didn't have a choice of what music style we're going to do because we chose for you. And that's because next episode is episode 8, and that is the season ending episode. So we have to go out with a bang. And we're going to go out with a Christmas cracker bang. Oh, yeah.
Oh, oh no. Oh, no.
So Ralf and I are going to join forces and we are going to create the ultimate Christmas song. Oh, God, I'm bigging it up too much, aren't I, Ralf?
Yeah.
I have no idea how we're going to do this. Ralf and I have written songs before, but we've usually been in the same place when we do it. And so I'm very curious how this is going to work. We'll figure something out, but we're going to write a Christmas song. And we asked you to choose what kind of quirky Christmas topic we should write our Christmas song about. So, Ralf, do you have the results open?
Yes. First of all, we did have a poll up about the genre. Do you remember? So we had 4 options there. Number 1, Christmas songs. Number 2, that's it. That's your options. Number 3, no, really, it's going to be Christmas songs. And number 4, would you shut up, man?
And do we have a winner?
We have a tie.
A tie?
Between Christmas songs and would you shut up, man?
Why am I not surprised?
We just a direct Joe Biden quote, which is very nice. But of course.
Topical as well.
Perfect. We did have 4 topics for our Christmas songs up to vote on. We had number 1, putting on loads of weight during Christmas. Number 2, hour, and that is important, emphasis on hour, 12 days of Christmas. Getting absolutely hammered the night before Christmas. And number 4, your Christmas tree burning down the house. And can I tell you, Dan?
You may.
That we have a clear winner. We have
do we?
A landslide. Do you want to take a guess what one?
Oh, it's difficult. It's the
weight, 12 days of Christmas, hammered before Christmas tree burning down.
I think it's going to be number 3, getting hammered the night before Christmas.
And you would be right, with overwhelming 40% of the vote, ahead of number 2 at 28, and the others at 16, getting absolutely hammered the night before Christmas won.
But Ralf, did that also win the Electoral College vote?
No,
It's won the popular vote.
Donald Trump won the Electoral College vote. Literally, to anyone listening from the US, stop calling yourself a democracy, please.
Okay, so we have a clear winner. So that's awesome news. Ralf and I are going to be writing a Christmas song about getting hammered the night before Christmas.
That's
something
a
which we can
topic.
Yeah, we can all relate to that. That's going to be amazing. I cannot wait for that.
We have to figure out how we do it, but it's going to be amazing.
And it's going to be a special episode because it's the last of the season. So who knows what other surprises we'll throw in there. But this is the first time ever where we don't have to ask you to vote. Because
that is true. Yeah, maybe we should quickly talk about what is coming up in the month after that. So we just talked about this right before, but we, as you know, if you have been following the show since when we started in May, this is now the 7th month in a row that we have both written a song and recorded a song, and it is a bit draining.
It's exhausting. It
is exhausting. So we came up basically last month with this season idea, and we're going to start into the 2nd season of Songwriting Idiots proper next May. So there is going to be a couple of months, but in between we will come up with some special episodes here and there, do some fun stuff. We already got some things planned, so please do stay subscribed and subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to stay up to date. There's going to be some fun stuff coming on, but the classic Songwriting Idiot show of us writing a song and you voting on it is going to come back next year.
After our last episode next month.
Obviously.
December. Yeah. So you've got that still to look forward to. What a great Christmas present that is.
For whom?
I don't know. So you can follow us on Instagram, please. Would be great. We'll put up some interesting Christmas content over the coming months. And also that will let you keep in touch with us over the kind of off season where, as Ralf said, we'll be still putting out some little kind of bonus episodes so you don't forget what we sound like, and tide you over until it all kicks off again in earnest in May next year. And don't forget to check out our Spotify playlist as well, because we're going to put all of the ska songs that we listen to on our Spotify playlist, so you can check out the kind of music that we were listening to over the last month.
All of that is, of course, in the show notes. Also there, you can find a link to our website where you can download all our songs. So our 2 ska songs, but all the other songs as well. They're on our website. You can find the link down there. Or you just go to songwritingidiots.com/songs. I wanted to say vote because I'm so used to it. But no.
Yeah, I know, right? But there's no vote this time. So we'd love to hear from you. Please get in touch. Don't be shy. And it will also keep us entertained over the off season. But until then, Ralf and I are going to get busy writing our Christmas song about getting absolutely hammered the night before Christmas.
And we will be back with whatever result in December.
See you then. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye. Well, wait a second. Someone is drilling. What the fuck?
Shut the fuck up.
It's way too late for fuck.
Leave this in, by the way. This is not an outtake.
Okay, good.
Shut up.
Arruis!
Geschlecht.
Go on.
You were saying, Dan?